What's going on, everybody, and welcome on in to the Dawg House, the third installment here in season 2 of the Dawg House, and we have got a great show coming up. It's Browns Giants week. The Cleveland Browns fresh off their first win of the season, and I've got a fantastic special guest that's going to join me in just a minute as we preview what this game looks like. The Browns coming back home looking to get their first home win of the season against the 0-2 New York Giants. Again, you're joining me here on the OBR streaming network. Make sure you get over to the OBR right now. The Orange and Brown Report is the Cleveland's largest and oldest Cleveland Browns coverage site in all of the land. And you want to be tuned into it. So make sure you get over to the OBR.com and hit subscribe. Make sure you get to the YouTube channel or the Twitch channel where you guys are right now and you hit subscribe. And sorry, I see a thing that says no sound, and I don't know if that's somebody. Raise your hand if you can hear me say something, but or put something in the chat if you can hear me. That threw me off. But get over to the OBR, make sure you're subscribed to everything else, and just a little thing. It says sound is all good. Okay, great. A little reminder: after the Dawg House here on the OBR streaming network, you're going to get an hour break. You're going to get an hour break from 8 to 9. Go hang out, kiss the kids goodnight, have a good time with the family, and then get right back here. At 9 o'clock, we got the Garage Beers podcast, myself, Chad, Joey. We're going to talk a little Blue Jackets, It's going to be a little bit of a tough topic, but we're going to talk Blue Jackets. We're going to talk about the Browns. We're going to talk about the Guardians and so much more. So you hang out with me for an hour here on the Dawg House, and then I'll be right back with you on Garage Beers at 9 o'clock. So without any further ado, I'm so excited for my special guest this week. And it's because this guy is a Clevelander. This guy, it's in his Twitter bio that he's a recovering Cleveland Browns fan. I don't know if you can actually recover from that or not, but I'm very excited to talk to him because he's made his way from Cleveland here, the West Side, St. Ignatius. He's made his way from Cleveland News Media here, where he was once a part of Cleveland News Media, and all the way out to New York, where now he is a sports anchor for NBC News in New York. I'm excited to bring him in right now. It's John Chandler. John, welcome on into the Dawg House.
Hey, man. How's it going?
I'm so excited to have you.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for this game. This is, like I said on Twitter, this is like, I feel like George Costanza. Worlds colliding right now. Relationship George is not prepared for what is coming on Sunday. We've been down this road a few times with the Browns and the Giants, and, I don't know. I don't know what to expect from this game.
Well, listen, we're going to try to work our way through that here, John. We're going to try to work our way through what we think is going to happen in this game. But I don't think anybody knows after what we've seen from the Giants through 2 weeks, where they are 0-2. But there have been some big moments, some good moments, some bad moments. And what we see from the Browns just getting slaughtered in week 1 and then getting a nice bounce back down in Jacksonville in week 2. So who knows what we're going to see.
That is why they play the games, of course.
That's right.
So we can watch and be tortured. As I know, I am a recovering Browns fan. Grew up in the 80s. My uncle was the voice of the Browns, Nev Chandler, for a long time. And then got to cover the Browns in the early aughts. And I feel like the Giants right now feel like they are trending in that dangerous zone of too many coaches in a short period of time, the way it was under those Browns. So this is a very precarious time. And I think the feeling around here is this is a must win for the Giants after blowing what should have been a must win against Washington on Sunday.
Well, we'll dive into all that because I do think there's some really interesting questions floating around the New York Giants. And it's something that feels all too familiar around here, although we now
Bill Belichick. How about that? That's floating around. We can get into that.
Hey, you never know. It could happen. Let's not write Brian Daboll off too fast, though. So, John, real quick, and again, I always like to start with just a little bit about you because, again, we know you here in Cleveland. We obviously know the name. The Browns fans are going to get excited just bringing up Nev Chandler, especially those of us that, remember days back then, which I know a lot of our folks in here watching do. But let's just talk about you a little bit and how you made your way out to New York. How long have you been in New York and covering the Giants and just a little bit about your story coming from Cleveland and getting out there.
Yeah, so I've been here 10 years now at NBC New York, and in between Cleveland and here, I was in Boston, covered the Patriots for years, worked at New England Sports Network and WEEI sports radio there, and and ended up in New York 10 years ago. Just kind of falls into place. My dad showed me a picture not too long ago from a high school trip. I always wanted to work at Rockefeller Center. I always wanted to work, I idolized Bob Costas and NBC Sports. I had a NBC Sports hat right there with my Browns hat growing up. And, I had a picture of myself as in high school outside of Rockefeller Center. I put this out on social media too. I mean, I walk by that very same spot every day now to go into work that I took a picture, at age 16 or whatever on a college visit in New York City. So it really is a dream to be able to do this. It's a hard business. So every day you survive in this business is a day that you're grateful for. So, it's amazing. We have 11 pro teams here. We have all these colleges. The Jets and the Giants are constantly keeping us busy, and it's a lot of fun. The Giants are a world-class organization, so it's great to be able to cover them. We're lucky enough to have their preseason games on our air, and that's a relationship we value a lot. So,
Well, this has been, I don't know that I have to, just on a personal note, I don't know that anybody's more excited about this than my mother and my sister. Because literally since I've started doing this show, they've been like, you got to get John Chandler on. He's like a Rocky River and
River.
And my mom's like, his grandparents lived on the same street her parents lived on. I'm like, oh my gosh. All right, well, I didn't know.
I mentioned your name to my parents who are downstairs in my house right now visiting, and they were like, "Oh my God, yeah!" And I, of course, your sister and I went to school together, elementary school, good old St. Chris there in River. So
St. Chris alumni here. So yes, you got a couple of super fans. All right, John. So let's dive into this, and let's start by just kind of looking at how we've gotten to where we've gotten, really, with both of these teams. And part of the reason I'm so excited about this, what I love about this show and what we do here, John, is that we really try to get both perspectives.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll have our guests come in with questions that people in their city are probably asking about the Cleveland Browns. And the cool thing about this is, you follow the Browns still. I know you got to work with the Giants and the Jets, and I know you say you're a recovering Browns fan, but the Browns fan never leaves. It just stays inside.
It's suppressed deep inside. I've pushed it down as much as I can. And true story, and I've told this to Mr. Mara here with the Giants, that when I was in the 80s, right? And John Elway ruined my childhood and your childhood and so many of our when Elway beat the Browns with the drive and all that, not to go down bad memory lane, and Rich Karlis missed that field goal, to my dying day, I will maintain that he missed that field goal. Another story for another day, but they go on to play the Giants in the Super Bowl. And I instantly became a New York Giants football fan from that moment on. Super Bowl 20 whatever, after the 1986 season, and they beat John Elway and the Broncos, and I was in on Big Blue, and have held that strong ever since, because they're a first class organization. Like I say, they're great, and they beat Elway when we couldn't.
And they beat Brady a couple times too. So you've seen some Super Bowls over there, which is pretty exciting.
I was
Although you were probably on the other side when that happened. I
was covering the Patriots at the time of both of those Super Bowls, so that was interesting.
A little bittersweet on your end. So let's talk about the Giants, and here's this 0-2 football team, and it's a team that came in with obviously questions as far as really skill position. You come in kind of running in. The Saquon Barkley leaves the Giants and goes to the Eagles, of all places. So a little bit of a gut punch, although I know today might have been a little bit of a happy day for the Giants fans based on what happened last night. But you bring in this unbelievable talent in Malik Neighbors at wide receiver. You got Devin Singletary as the running back. They kind of revamped the offense a little bit. It's still Daniel Jones chucking the ball in the backfield there. It's a pretty decent offensive line, but it's a team that just seems like through the first couple of weeks they just finding ways to lose games, especially this last week against Washington. And you said it, but they just seem like they do enough to kind of be competitive in a game, but then they just find ways to lose.
They're in a weird spot right now. It's a really weird spot with this team. And I mean, that game was about as frustrating a game as the Giants have had in recent memory, from the standpoint of mismanagement on Brian Dable's part. He's taking a lot of heat right now for the kicker situation alone. I mean, you knew Graham Gano was injured going in. You had another kicker on the practice squad, and they mismanaged that. You don't have a kicker. You lose a football game scoring 3 touchdowns and not giving up a touchdown. I think, if memory serves, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they are the first team in NFL history, at least modern NFL history, to do that. And that's a pretty dubious mark right there. And so, Daniel Jones had been the story after week 1, and everyone seemed ready after one game to say, okay, we've seen enough now. Let's move on from Daniel Jones. We could all agree we need to find a new quarterback here. But then I thought Daniel Jones played pretty well against Washington, as he historically does. And all of a sudden, he's not the story. Now Brian Dable's the story. And, it's just a real big mess right now. And yet there are pieces. You have a guy that looks like an absolute slam dunk of a draft pick in Malik Neighbors. He's been fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
You have Devin Singletary, who I know, I mean, I talked to him at length before the season started, how excited he was to jump into this role. He wasn't worried about Saquon Barkley and all of that noise and trying to replace him. He was very comfortable in, I'm going to be me. I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to fill this how I want to fill it and how I see it fit. And I think he's going to be a good fit. But I think ultimately with the Giants, this comes down to, and you mentioned it, their offensive line. It's decent. It's got to be better than decent for this to work with this Giants team. And it's the reason Daniel Jones hasn't developed. It's the reason they haven't been able to get much going after Brian Daboll comes out and wins Coach of the Year 2 years ago. It's the thing that is holding them back. And it's because they've missed on draft picks. It's because they haven't, coached it up a proper way. It's because of injuries. It's all of these things together. But it comes back to the offensive line as the thing that has really been holding them back more than anything, I think.
Well, you did hit on, and I'm not trying to rub this into Giants fans, but you did hit on, you were accurate when you said that they were the first team in NFL history to score 3 touchdowns in a game.
Not good.
Not allow a touchdown and then lose.
As Yankees manager, former manager Joe Girardi always liked to say, it's not what you want.
Not at all.
No.
But talk about just the element of, because I think a guy that a lot of Browns fans are going to have their eye on in this game when we're talking about the Browns defense going up against that Giants offense is Malik Neighbors. And this sounds like, and looks certainly through the first 2 weeks, like a guy that they did hit on. What kind of element is he bringing, and what are you seeing out of this kid? As somebody who's covered the NFL for years, what are you seeing out of this kid after 2 weeks that just shows you that he's special?
I mean, he's as good of a prospect as I've been around and I've seen covering, all of these teams in so long. And everybody instantly says, well, it's like we have Odell Beckham Jr. here again. And this is different. This guy is a game changer in every respect. He's a guy that you target. He's a guy that you go after. He's a guy that you game plan for, not just including him, but I forget, and I'd love to give credit to whoever wrote it, but whoever wrote it this way, and I'll go back and I'll look it up, but he is the game plan, it is Malik Neighbors. That's the Giants offense. I forget where I saw that, but it is worded perfectly because that's the way it is right now with this Giants team. And it should be. He's electric. And we saw it from day one in camp. I mean, you're standing on the field, turning around, looking at each other at training camp. We're like, wow, this dude is amazing. Yeah. And everybody's excited about it. And he's said all the right things, done all the right things, worked hard. I mean, it's just smart player, smart pick. Guy fits perfectly. It's just, does he have the quarterback that can consistently get him the ball? And does he have an offensive line in front of that quarterback that can give the quarterback time to get him the ball? That's really what it all kind of boils down to for the Giants right now. And I don't know the answer to that. Right now, I'm not so sure.
Well, and I got to tell you, John, because you've brought up the offensive line a couple of times, and it surprises me a little bit because I haven't watched every second of the Giants games. Frankly, I don't know that I've watched the Giants games at this point. But just in looking at the way the season has started, I know they're kind of touting the offensive line as having a good start to the season. I think they're 6th in the NFL in pass rush grades.
Sounds right. Yeah, I think it's right out there.
So it sounds like they're doing an okay job protecting Daniel Jones. And where's the weakness?
Well, the weakness is Evan Neal for starters.
Okay.
And, he's kind of been moved out of the picture with them. They did a great job this offseason in, at least on paper, addressing it and, bringing in guys who have experience, guys who are vets, guys, who have a track record of playing, right? Because the big thing with the offensive line is while they have talent, it's consistently undone by injuries. So I think the feeling is this year, okay, they finally got this offensive line right. But, they got to see it. It's really hard to read anything about this Giants team from that first game because it was just an unmitigated disaster. So I think the frustration is from the Giants standpoint, you looked a little more like you thought you were going to look and you hoped to look against Washington. But then you've got the kicker issue and, your injured kicker that you have no real substitution for, no plan B on how to get these field goals. And so that's mismanaged and that undoes what really should be a win. And the thing is, the first 2 games, really kind of had to be wins for this Giants team, because their schedule, starting with the Browns on Sunday, just gets miserable for the next 5 or 6 weeks. And so it's a little deflating for them to know that they're, I think, for the 6th time in 8 years now, starting a season at 0-2. And, look at the numbers, the statistics. If you start a season, an NFL season, 0-2, it does not bode well for your playoff hopes. So that's the frustration with the Giants right now is, okay, maybe we finally got this offensive line right, but we're doing things still to kind of unwind the good and costing ourselves victories. And they're a team with a schedule that cannot afford to cost themselves victories at this point.
Yeah, we heard a lot about that actually in the broadcast of the Browns-Jaguars game this week, because, again, two teams trying not to start 0-2. And I want to say the Browns, the last 13 times they've started 0-2, they've missed the playoffs, which is not surprising based on how many times that's probably happened in the
It's amazing.
decades.
I mean, it's a long schedule, but so you think 2 games in, no big deal, but, it's not something you can really recover from historically, statistically in the NFL. One of the few teams that has done it in history, the 2007 New York Football Giants.
Yeah, that's right. What a year. What a classic year.
So it can be done.
That's right. And you just need a couple things to go your way. You need some helmet catches, and things can go your way. That's right. Man, I was planning on starting with positives. The last positive that I wrote down, again, specifically offensively, but you brought him up before, and you said you were kind of excited and talked to him about how excited he was before the season. But here's Devin Singletary, who had flashes and moments at his time in Buffalo, and there wasn't much happening in Houston. And he comes in, and I want to say through the first 2 weeks of the season, not only is he running the ball well and playing well within their offense, I want to say he's leading the NFL in broken tackles from the running back position. So it seems like he's kind of found a little bit of a resurgence there with the Giants.
He was so excited about joining this Giants team. He felt like he would fit right in. You talk about the offensive line and their hopes for improving it. And part of that was, to help Daniel Jones in pass protection. But you've got Devin Singletary. You got to give him a chance. Saquon Barkley was a big tackle breaker, right? But the offensive line struggles were part of what contributed
That's
to
fair.
Saquon's injuries. And it was bad all around. So you come in, fresh start, new offensive line, new running back who's jacked to play here, and the team is excited about his potential. And I think you saw it on Sunday from him. He's a guy that I'm staring him in the eyes when I'm standing in front of his locker talking to him, and so he's not tall. And
Is that what that means? Okay,
that's what that means. There's another word for it, but I don't like to use it as someone who's 5'8". But but he's, similar to Saquon. He's muscular. He's built right for it. He's quick. He's smart. He can see holes and get to them quickly. So I think there's an excitement for Devin Singletary and certainly what he flashed on Sunday. It would be ideal for the Giants if because you can't be one-dimensional. If everybody knows, Malik Neighbors is getting targets, that's where you're going with the football, then you're not going to surprise a lot of people. So they need around Malik Neighbors, the Devin Singletaries. They need, Jalen Hyatt, who was a first-rounder 2 years ago, and he told me at training camp last year. I said, "What's your goal for this year?" And he said, "Win Rookie of the Year." Well, he didn't do that. So there's some expectations now on Jalen Hyatt this year, and there's guys that need to step it up for this team.
So now it's time to get into a couple of the tough conversations that happened with the Giants, and we brought it up earlier. Our old friend here in Cleveland, Brian Daboll, who running the ship again, a couple years removed from a Coach of the Year,
right?
But now we're talking about he's in year 3 of his New York Giants head coaching tenure. Starting 0-2 again, and it seems like the noise is getting awfully loud there in New York about the displeasure with Brian Daboll and his coaching abilities. So, just what are you hearing there? What are the fans saying there? And how loud is it getting for people being unhappy with him?
Oh, it's loud. It's certainly loud. It was driving around today. I was, in and around the area working on a few stories today, and you get in the car and you turn on talk radio, and they're debating whether or not Daboll's got a future here, and then you get out of the car and an hour later you're getting back in it and they're still talking about Is it Belichick now that's going to come in? And there's a lot of talk about that right now. And, I still think Brian Daboll is the right coach for the job. I think Brian Daboll has the opportunity and the skills and the wherewithal and the tough skin to be a very good head coach in the NFL. This is going to test him. He heard the questions. He was asked point blank after the loss against Washington Sunday. Do you think your job is on the line? Are you worried about your job status here? And he brushed off the question as best he could, and it's a fair question. It is a fair question at this point because, John Mara, co-owner at the beginning of the season, said he wanted to see significant improvement with this team. What is significant improvement? Is that getting back to the playoffs? Is that a winning record? Whatever. And he didn't say specifically what significant improvement is. He didn't put an actual definition on it, so it's kind of left open for interpretation. But I think, the Giants don't want to get into replacing another head coach. Everybody wants Brian Daboll to be the guy. You want Joe Shane to be the guy. You want to have them in place, and you want that long-term sustainable success that they were hoping to build. And it looked like they were building when he won Coach of the Year in 2022 when they go to the playoffs and had success there. So, how do they get back to that? How do they get back on course? Well, they got to get healthy, and they got to hit on draft picks and offseason acquisitions at a better rate than they have in the last 2 years. And that remains to be seen. And, you got to win. That's the only way you're going to quiet these rumors, because whether or not, and I don't know, I haven't talked to Bill Belichick. I don't know if Bill Belichick wants to coach the New York Football Giants next year, if he is sitting out, not coaching because that's what he wants to do. But I do know, and this was something you could always, when I covered the Patriots, you'd always ask Bill Belichick. Anytime Belichick got asked about the New York Giants, it's a great answer. It's a soft spot in his heart. He loves this place, and he loves the team. And I know the team loves him. So, that's hanging out there. And as long as Daboll's winning, then you don't have to worry about that. But if he starts losing, well, then are we going to have a decision to make here in New York? Because you got to win, and the pressure's on him. And down the road in Florham Park in New Jersey, the other tenant of MetLife Stadium, the Jets, if they're going to the playoffs, that's a bad look for the Giants.
Yeah.
There is a competition between those two teams, no doubt.
I know there is a history with Belichick and the Giants. I know he loves the Giants.
Okay.
And he's made those comments before. But a part of me as a non-New Yorker, I'm not trying to take shots at New Yorkers, but part of me as a non-New Yorker just listens to that and goes, oh, there's that New York thing where it's like, oh, well, we just fire our coach. And of course we'll bring in the best coach of all time. And of course he's going to want to come in. It reminded me of a little bit with the Cavaliers when we weren't sure about Donovan Mitchell and whether or not he was going to be staying. I heard a lot of people in New York being like, well, Knicks could just send the Cavs, and it was just two end of the bench guys, and they'll trade us Donovan Mitchell. It's like, no, just because they play for the Knicks doesn't mean
it's going to work that way.
Doesn't mean this isn't working like that.
Just because Donovan Mitchell wanted to play for the Knicks or thought he was at least headed for the Knicks.
Right.
And, I think it's worked out great for both teams.
Yes. Yeah, it worked out.
No, it worked out great,
But you don't. And I know that, again, New York, it's a primetime place. It's a major market. But this as a Browns guy, you get into that coach carousel, it's hard to get out. It's hard to get out.
That's where it feels like the Giants have kind of gotten themselves into, and that's why they were so excited when Brian Daboll won Coach of the Year and everything looked stabilized. That they thought, okay, we've gotten out of that. Because I remember I was in Berea in that media room when Chris Palmer was the head coach, and he says, and everybody was kind of like, I don't know what the record was at that point in 2000 or 2000. Yeah, it was 2000. He lasted 2 years. And he says, just feels like a runaway train.
You're right.
And everybody in the press conference that was asleep kind of look up. Did he just say, this team felt like a runaway train? And that's the moment that you knew, okay, this man is not going to be the head coach of this team much longer, right? And then in comes Butch Davis and Romeo Crennel. And we all know what that cycle was. But being around that team and covering that team in that stretch, and then the Giants have gotten into this, and you don't expect an organization like the Giants to to get into this. I mean, the Browns were an expansion team coming back
Right.
back then. They had their management issues then, and this should be different. And if they don't start winning games, we're trending down a very slippery slope here with this Giants team. So they got to start winning.
Until the Kevin Stefanski era here in Cleveland, that era that you just referenced, Palmer to Davis to Romeo.
It was a long era.
But that was the stable coaching era of the new Browns.
The Butch Davis, Romeo Crennel.
We're not even talking about Chudzinski getting 1 year and Freddie Kitchens having a year. We're not even talking about guys that just came for a year and left. That was the stable era. The other thing that I think a lot of people and listen, I thought it was kind of sad, but this is just fans. This is fans being fans. And you talked about him bouncing back in this last game, but after game 1 and that loss against Minnesota, which turns out to maybe not look like the worst loss of all time, the way Minnesota took care of San Francisco. But you got fans outside the stadium calling Daniel Jones Danny Pennies. And there's videos of that as he's walking by. It just feels like it's becoming contentious. And listen, Daniel Jones, you can say he's got all the talent. You can say certainly has the physical capabilities to play quarterback. But until he puts it together on a consistent basis, it's going to be tough for him to win the fans over, right?
And look, the big problem with Daniel Jones is, yes, inconsistent play. But the big problem to me is he can't stay healthy. You know, and that's really an issue. And I know that's a concern for the Giants. And I think that was clearly laid bare during Hard Knocks this offseason. And, I thought credit to the Giants for allowing the HBO cameras in there and the access that they allowed and the honesty that I think they showed. I mean, it's certainly had to be frustrating if I'm Daniel Jones and I'm watching that and I'm learning in real time that this team was trying to get Drake May. They were trying to trade up. Brian Dable said point blank in a meeting, he'd trade up to get Jaden Daniels. So when you're hearing that and, so what have you done for me lately, league? We all know that. But, Daniel Jones had to come in with his confidence shaken. But the Giants are right to start thinking about that too, because he's coming off of an ACL. They don't know how he's going to look. So there's a lot of questions with Daniel Jones in the future, and they're paying him a lot of money. And I think people look at that and they say, well, that you could be using that money for other stuff. If he's winning, all of a sudden with other quarterback deals out there, that Daniel Jones contract doesn't look as bad. But the problem is he's not playing, and so far he has not been winning. There was a point coming into this season where he had thrown more interceptions returned for touchdowns than touchdowns. So, and that's changed. And again, he played well for the most part. I mean, he found the end zone. He moved the team. He showed that he can. And the big test for me coming in is off of that ACL, because his mobility is such a big part, maybe an underrated part of his game. But he needs to be able to move around. And the Giants and Brian Dable did well in 2022 using his athletic ability and using his ability to kind of avoid the rush and move in the pocket when he needs to his advantage. But the turnovers got Daniel Jones, protecting the football got Daniel Jones in the past, and the injuries and in full fairness to Daniel Jones, that offensive line had been dreadful for 2 years. They won in 2022 in spite of a bad offensive line around. So, I'm kind of excited to see, and I know it was frustrating for Giants fans after week 1, but I still hold out hope that for them, that Daniel Jones can be a good quarterback for this team, because he's a great guy. He works his butt off. He has worked so hard to get back to healthy. And, I asked him before the season if he had any kind of restrictions or if there was a benchmark that he needed to feel on his knee. And he said, no, I'm good to go. I'm ready to play. Even though he didn't play much in the preseason, he felt ready, and you could tell he's just itching to get out there and prove it. And he just wants to ball out there. He wants to have that rapport with Malik Neighbors. He wants to win. He wants this to go well, of course. So, it's not for a lack of effort right now.
Well, it's going to be, I'm sure, ad nauseum as we lead up to this game on Sunday, Cleveland Brown Stadium. The thing I think we're going to hear ad nauseum, and it's fair until it's not fair, But I think we're talking about the two poster children of the bad contracts.
This is the bad
NFL.
contract Super Bowl for quarterbacks. Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Deshaun and Daniel Jones are easily the top two people that are going to be talked about as the worst contracts in the NFL. And that's what we're watching on Sunday.
But if they win, that's the thing. That's the winning is the great equalizer. And
that's right.
If they go out and they play well and their teams win, then all of a sudden nobody's talking about it. And, the Giants have a little bit of an easier out with Daniel Jones' contract than the Browns situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a less of a cap hit situation for the Giants. And they just
need to see. There is no out. There is no out.
So
we're in. We're just in. There's no doors to this room. We are just in the room, stuck in it.
It is head scratching. Sometimes when I'm stuck in traffic and I'm just sitting there waiting, and that can happen a lot, obviously, around the New York metro area. Sitting in the Lincoln Tunnel, and I'll be like, can I name the Browns quarterbacks from 1999 today in order?
No.
I get to Bruce Gronkowski, and then I call it
shout out to Bruce.
And I always forget
Toledo legend.
Kaiser. I'll forget DeShone Kaiser, and
Oh, there's some Thad Lewis.
That's another one I forgot.
Spurgeon win. Come on. No,
Spurgeon was always great to talk to in the locker room. I always like Spurgeon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. So let's shift over to the Browns for a minute, because we've got a team that started 0-1, that horrendous game against the Cowboys. Kind of a weird game in which they just made so many mistakes. Offensively, they couldn't really do anything. Defensively, they played all right against the Cowboys. I want to say Dak Prescott threw for like 170 some yards. Like, it wasn't like the Cowboys lit up the Browns.
Yeah, no.
Defense, but right now the Browns story is this. Even in a victory against the Jacksonville Jaguars, it was a victory that the Browns should have had by probably 2 touchdowns. And instead, the Browns have come out this season and committed more penalties than you could have ever imagined. It was a penalty fest in both games. It cost them a game in week 1. And last week against the Jags, they were able to play well enough. Defensively, they stepped up and got a safety at the end of the game to really put it away. But the Browns got to figure that out, because that right now is the big concern. Offensively, they looked much better against Jacksonville. Defensively, they're playing great. But there's not many games you can come out in the NFL, commit 13 penalties or 14 penalties or whatever it is, and win the game.
They are consistently one of the most undisciplined football teams. Going back to 99, I mean, it is confounding how it is just always a problem. It always feels like when there's a big play, it's coming back. You're looking for a flag. You spend your life looking for yellow flags. That's what it feels like to be a Browns fan sometimes. In all seriousness, I think that this matchup has the potential, like the Browns offensively, I think can run the ball on the Giants. I mean, Washington kind of showed that, right? I'm waiting for this Giants defense to there's kind of a feeling out period with this Giants defense, because I think they have the potential. They certainly have some stars. I mean, Dexter Lawrence is a beast, right? Dexter Lawrence is one of the best at his position in football. And Kayvon Thibodeau, they are waiting for him to become that. And he has definitely showed flashes of wow, this guy could be something special. And if they could consistently find a way, then that Giants defense looks a little bit tougher. And they think they've got, they think they are a little bit better in the secondary than maybe they look on paper. But if you can't stop the run, then that's going to be a problem, because that's something the Browns can do.
Yeah, well, that's interesting that you say that, because I feel like it's something the Browns can do with Nick Chubb. But the Browns have struggled running the football without Nick Chubb. And we did see him get back to it a little bit more. We saw them kind of commit to it a little bit more in this game against Jacksonville.
I think they have to.
Well, Deontay Foreman got some touches.
Yeah.
Jerome Ford looked pretty good in the game against Jacksonville. But the New York Giants have been, I think the worst team against the run to start this year through 2 weeks. I'm not sure if it's officially the worst, but they've not been good against the run. And so if you're a Browns fan, I know a lot of Browns fans are talking about this. A game like this against a Giants team that is not good at defending the run is kind of what the doctor ordered, or it feels like it, but you've got to commit to it and get after it and run the football.
Yeah, and I would expect that's what the Browns are going to do. I mean, if that, that has to be the game plan going against the Giants, because I don't, you've you've certainly watched Deshaun Watson. Like, I don't think he's throwing with any consistency on any team right now in the NFL. So I think the Giants are expecting to see a heavy dose of run from the Browns, and the question is, can they stop it? They couldn't stop Brian Robinson, and Washington. I think Washington went for over 200 yards on him on the ground, and yet the Giants had a chance to win that game. So they're kind of hanging their hat on that. If they can tighten some things up, they've figured out the kicker situation, then maybe they have some avenues to turn this around and get a win. But the matchup does not look good for the Giants. I will say that.
Oh, it may not, but that's why you play those games on Sunday. Talk about what's being said over there in New York, in the media mecca of the country, and their football team. We always like to hear here in Cleveland what people are saying about the matchup with the Browns. When you're tuning in and listening to sports talk, what do you hear in the sports talk guys say? What do you hear in the callers say as far as what they're saying about the Cleveland Browns and kind of the questions they have coming into this game?
Well, what is going on with Deshaun Watson is the primary, talking point when it comes to the Browns, not just here in New York. I mean, just everywhere, it is. And I think a lot of people feel the frustration of Browns fans in that, look, you've got a defense in Cleveland that is Super Bowl caliber, right? You've got a defense that should be able, to shut down just about any offense in the NFL. And so you've got that piece right.
Right.
At least on paper. And when Nick Chubb is healthy, you've got a running game. You should have some semblance of an offense. And I think the thing that, at least from stepping back, not being in Cleveland, and like all of us watching when Joe Flacco came in, and we had Joe Flacco here with the Jets. In fact, the Jets, I'm sure, were kicking themselves last year that they didn't go out and get Joe Flacco when Aaron Rodgers went down. You watch him come in, and you're like, oh, that's how the offense is supposed to look. Because, he played like a legitimate quarterback. Like, he made the right throws. And so I think a lot of people are looking at this Browns team and they're like, well, there's an opportunity to beat them because Deshaun Watson is a wild card for that team at quarterback. You're not sure, you're kind of half expecting, and a lot of people that remember him with the Texans half expecting, like, okay, is he going to snap out at some point? Is he going to all of a sudden put it together one of these Sundays and look like the guy? And certainly he's not leaving anyone with the impression that that's around the corner. And I think a lot of people look at the Browns and they just think the defense is in place. All these other pieces seem to be in place, and the quarterback is what is holding them back right now. So, and you're looking at it from a defensive standpoint, and this is a test for the Giants. This is a test for Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors and Devin Singletary. It's a test for that offensive line. How can we perform against what is really a top-tier defense in the NFL? So we saw Daniel Jones has a history of playing so well against Washington. He's won 5 out of 6 games now against Washington, and you kind of knew that was coming. So that was important for him confidence-wise. Now he's got to go up against the Browns. And if he can do something against this Browns defense, now the Giants have to start feeling, okay, maybe we've got something. We can turn this around. If they can get to 1-2, get a good win against a really great defense in Cleveland, then maybe they can build on that. That's the hope here.
And it's funny you say that, and obviously here in Cleveland, a lot of people are. It's been a tough juggle, to be honest with you, John. It's been a tough thing to juggle because you have the other outside factors that you can't ignore, but it's also your football team, right? And so now you've got this quarterback that it's like, okay, well, for crying out loud, they went this direction.
Yeah, it's an unenviable position to be in, for sure.
But we need this. Okay, if you're going to do this guy's going to come out and do something, right? This guy's going to come out and do something. And it's been tough because, and you really heard it. If you paid any attention to that Browns-Cowboys game week 1, the stadium was
it was
vocal.
It was tough
in their displeasure.
that was a tough watch, yeah.
But I really do think, and this game I kind of had circled coming in as, and now especially the way that the season has gone for the Giants, where they've been really bad against the run.
Yeah.
You come in against a Browns team where, as the Giants and Brian Daboll, you have to anticipate that the Browns are going to try to run the ball on you. And I would imagine a lot of practice this week for the Giants is going to be focused on not letting the Browns kill you on the ground, right? Put the ball in Deshaun Watson's hands and make him beat you. Well, listen, as a Browns fan and as somebody who talks about the Browns, here's a test for Deshaun.
Yeah.
If the Giants are going to sell out to stop the run, which you would anticipate they're going to at least make some moves to try to do that, and they're going to put the ball in the $230 million quarterback's hands and say, you got to beat us, and it's not one of the top defenses in the league, he's got to be able to go out and play well. Like, this to me is a game where Deshaun has to come out and play well. There's going to be a lot of questions if he looks kind of shaky or inconsistent or anything in this game. He should be able to come out and control this game for what is expected out of him. I mean, I think that's fair, right?
I think that's fair. I think given what the Giants defense has looked like so far, this should be an opportunity to do something. I would love to see a Wink Martindale coached defense and how it would handle this game on Sunday.
Right.
It's what it is. Wink is no longer here.
That's fair.
That's, things didn't go so well. And so here we are. So this is also a test for the Giants defense, and they know it. They've got to be able to stop the run. They know that, if the Browns are going to beat them, it's going to have to be through Deshaun Watson's arm. At least that has got to be the game plan. And, I would love to see what Wink could draw up to disrupt that, that offense in Cleveland and Deshaun Watson even more. But, this will be a test for this Giants defense.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about the guys, especially your pass rushers on that defensive line. Again, we here in Cleveland, we don't know who our tackles are going to be. They got
that's an advantage for the Giants for sure. I mean, you won that game in spite of that situation against Jacksonville. So that's the thing. Like, that's why I say, Wink would attack that.
Correct.
He would have the most bonkers design to, just mind-boggling game plan. Aggressive. He would go after that. And so we'll see how the Giants do that, because that opportunity is there for them. But, they have to feel secure in the secondary in order to do that. I mean, they need that defense to kind of be in sync right now. And I don't know that they're there yet.
Well, and that was going to be my next question for you, because we've talked about those pass rushers, and everybody knows about those pass rushers. But in the defensive backfield, again, it's going to be up to Deshaun to get these guys the ball, but it's been a slow start to the season for Amari Cooper. We would imagine that's not going to continue all the way through the season, because he's just been that good. Jerry Jeudy has looked really good in his start with the Cleveland Browns. Elijah Moore has shown more signs of life this season than he has ever shown. Obviously, the Browns without two big playmakers. We've talked a lot about Nick Chubb, and David Njoku going out that's a backbreaker for a guy that really is kind of a safety net for this offense. But the guys in that defensive backfield for the Giants, who are the guys that Browns fans should have their eyes on as guys that can come up and make plays and that are going to cause tough matchups for the Browns?
I think they're still trying to figure that out.
That's right. It's only week 3. Long season ahead, guys. Long season.
I mean, but that's the thing, is this Giants defense doesn't quite have an identity yet. And it starts. So Bobby Okereke was talking about this, and he's their captain, their linebacker. He was talking about how it really has to start up front for them. Their identity has to be, Dexter Lawrence in the middle and Kayvon coming off the edge and getting pressure on the quarterback to kind of help that young defensive backfield kind of get some legs under it. They've got guys, like Deonte Banks, they've got guys that have potential and promise, and guys that they think are going to develop into good players. But the strength of that Giants defense has got to be up front in order for that to happen.
I think it's interesting. You talked about like a little bit about the fans and how they're talking about this game. You talked about really feeling like this is a must-win game, which of course, if you start 0-3, we talked about how tough it is to overcome 0-2. 0-3, infinitely tougher to overcome. I think, I've got some people here in the comments. Mick says we're chalking this one up as a win. And says, I know you never count one as a win until it is, but we should beat the New York Giants at home. I think the fans here, John, I think the fans here, well, if you thought losing to the Cowboys, who are supposed to be a contender, a title contender this year, if you think losing to the Cowboys at home week 1 the way they did was bad, and you heard it from the fans in the stadium, I think it would be exponentially worse if they come out and lay a dud against the New York Giants, because you don't want to insult them. You got to account for Malik Neighbors. You got to account for the athleticism of Daniel Jones. But on paper, John, the Browns should be able to control this entire game.
Yeah, this should be. I mean, if you've looked at the Giants' first 2 games, I think everyone in the NFL is looking at it and saying, okay, this should be a win.
Yeah, that's fair.
For the most part. Like they're just, because they haven't shown that they could stop the run. They haven't shown any kind of consistency on offense. That's the thing. So the Giants know that they are basically an underdog now going into, and like I mentioned before, that schedule gets really hard starting with this Browns game for them. So they have that underdog mentality. And I think just coming off of last season, frankly, I think they've had that coming in altogether. Like they know, teams are kind of counting them out. And I think there's a part of them that likes that. I think if you ask
of course
players, I think they play well when they're counted out. But this is a really tough. I said it before, and I really believe it. I think it's a really tough matchup for the Giants because of how good that defense is, and because teams can run on the Giants. So if they can show that they can stop things up front, then they've got a chance.
So the last thing, we didn't really talk about this much, but I will say this. You need to rely, I think, to beat the Cleveland Browns. And you saw it with the Cowboys week 1. You have to rely on special teams somehow, some way, right? Yeah. The Cowboys returned a punt for a touchdown. Not just that, though, but the Cowboys kicker was unbelievable in that week 1 game against the Browns. On Cleveland, I think we feel like we've shored a little bit of that up, and we've got a good kicker ourselves. But for the Giants to win, you feel like whoever they got going out there kicking this week is going to have to go out there and make some plays.
But it's got to be big. It's got to be more than that for them. Like they got to get the ball in the end zone with some sort of consistency. And but at this point, you feel like every game is, if it's going to be a win for the Giants, it's going to be a close game. I don't think this is a team that's blowing a lot of people out, unless some of those pieces really come together around Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors.
All right, I'm going to get a prediction from you in a minute, but I have a couple fun questions that I want to ask you. As a Cleveland guy, I got a couple of fun questions that I got to ask you, and then we'll get to that. First question, outside of football, the hot topic of conversation in Cleveland Browns world is, what are they doing with this stadium, right? They've released the concepts of the dome out in Brook Park. I feel like they've already gotten that far. I think they kind of know what they're going to do, but they've released the concepts for that. Obviously, you've got the stadium on the lake. You were a part, John. I think you could bring such a unique perspective to this because you were there from basically the opening, from basically when the Browns came. You were here covering the team.
Yes,
basically from the beginning. And I've always said, the outside of the way they built the team, which was rushed and hurried and forced, the way they built that stadium was also rushed and hurried and forced. And they wound up putting up a stadium that just wasn't ready to last for any amount of time.
Yeah.
So as a guy who's covered the Browns, and as a guy a St. Ignatius guy, a Cleveland guy, your thoughts? The renovating somehow the stadium they currently have on the lake, or the dome?
I mean, I've got over my shoulder here a picture of Old Municipal Stadium, and with the snow coming down, I think it's against the Houston Oilers.
Yep.
And so I get it. These new stadiums are beautiful. They're amazing, right? And particularly when the elements are blocked out and you don't have to worry about biting cold and everything. The conditions are perfect at all times. I get that. I get that accentuates talent, but like there's something about December and the snow is coming down and the grass that you're playing on looks like a cow pasture. And like, I love it. I love that. That makes me nostalgic, right? That makes me nostalgic. So I'm always going to gravitate towards the stadium on the lakefront, open to the elements. But that said, the renderings of Brook Park look amazing. I get that. Having them closer to Berea, closer to the airport, it's a different NFL today than the NFL that we all grew up with. And so, teams have to adapt to that. And if you want to compete, you've got to have the right stadium. It's essential. And if the Browns feel like they don't have the right stadium right now, then they got to do something about it. But the thing is, I just, it is so hard for me when I see teams, and it doesn't matter the sport, but the NFL especially, because it is such a cash cow, don't make the fans foot the bill. Like that just, they are hardworking fans that give up a lot in order to support your football team. Don't make the city, don't make the taxpayers foot the majority of the bill. Like, I don't understand NFL teams doing this, because I just think it robs the communities of money that should go towards schools, should go towards, upgrading facilities and things that are used on the regular, not just, 8 to 10 Sundays out of a year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people.
That looks like what Brook Park, it's designed to be more than just 8 to 10 Sundays out of a year, which is an advantage for a facility like that. If you can bring concerts in, if you can have events there, then that makes it a far more usable and sensible property than just, an empty stadium on the lakefront. But man, I love that stadium on the lakefront with the snow falling in December and the field looking like a cow pasture. That's the best. I'll
tell you, I still tell people all the time, that stadium over your shoulder. I've got a picture over in the other room over here of that stadium over your shoulder. And I could still smell it. I could still smell that place.
Well, some of those smells you might
want. No, not those smells. Not those smells. It's not what I'm talking about. Not those smells.
There are certainly some smells in there, but
it always smelled like peanut shells in the summer.
Oh yeah.
When the Indians were playing. And if you ever really want, and this is for all of you Browns fans, if you ever really want to go back, because they say your smell, your olfactory senses are your best source of your memory.
Yes.
Buy a Genesee cream ale and drink it, and it will take you immediately back to that stadium. It's why it's my favorite cheap beer on the planet.
Give me a foot-long hot dog with some stadium mustard.
That's right.
That's right there. A Genesee cream ale, a foot long with stadium mustard. Yes. Sitting in front of a pole in one of those mustard yellow seats that are the paint is peeling on the back of them.
And every time you got to go to the bathroom, you're rubbing shoulders with your closest friends.
It's in a trough.
In a trough.
God bless
you. I know. I do.
But then to hear, like, you'd walk down the ramp and you'd hear, "Here we go."
Oh, yeah.
Just echo. And I can still hear that today.
Those ramps, those beautiful ramps. Last question before I get to your prediction. Yes. Again, as somebody that covered the team, and again, we talked about your uncle, the voice of the Browns, for quite a while. A couple things. You made a post about it, but you have family that was the voice of the Cleveland Browns, and we got news right before the season, just shocking news right before the season that the voice of the Browns, for a good long time, really the only one. There were a couple after your uncle, but for a good long time, really the only one after your uncle, really the only one for this generation of the Browns, Jimmy Donovan, not calling the game. So give us maybe some of your favorite memories of Jimmy and I don't know, just some thoughts on Jimmy.
For me, because I got to know him personally, so I have those memories, right? And seeing how hard he worked behind the scenes. The guy is tireless, and we all know that. We see it, right? He's everywhere, covering Cleveland for the last 30 whatever years at KYC, and then also on Browns game. 25 years calling the Browns. That's an incredible run, and it's a run that we all wish could continue, because he's the voice of the Browns. He's William stands out.
Yes.
I love, just because the team was so bad in that stretch, and then we had been waiting for William Green to break out, and then to hear that, and it encapsulated, like, that enthusiasm and that just raw emotion, and yet keeping that professional level that Jimmy is always able to keep. He kind of merged the two so perfectly. His energy is relentless, and I know he's applying that towards his fight right now. And I'm glad you brought this up, because I'm gonna get a little emotional here. This is what I do. But the guy means so much to all of us. And it's been a joy to hear him and listen to him. When I left Cleveland in 2007 for Boston, we got Sirius XM radio just so I could listen to Jim Donovan and Doug Deacon call Browns games.
Yes.
Wherever I was, because that was so important to me, not just to watch games, but I wanted to hear it the way I used to turn up the radio and listen to 3WE and listen to my uncle and Doug Deacon and Jim Mueller, and the way they called games, and Casey Coleman, and then Jimmy and Deke. Like, that was so important to me. So I hate that he is not calling games anymore. I loved that he had 25 years calling games for the Browns, and I wish him all the best, because he was so good to me in my life and in my career, starting out, going back to, when I was in high school, and I called him up on a whim to see if he could help us out with a rally at St. Ignatius for a football game. I had never met him before. I just watched him on TV, and he says, "Yeah, I'll be there, of course," and he showed up, as he promised he would, and did the bit that we had, in our infinite wisdom, a bunch of high school seniors thought it was the funniest thing in the world, and they were just a bunch of dumb jokes. And Jimmy did it with a smile on his face, and he was happy to be there. And he offered me advice on what college to go to, and I ended up going to the same college he did, Boston University. And when I started working in Cleveland, at Channel 5, early 2000s, he was the first one to come up and say, "What do you need? What can I help you with? How can I get you acclimated?" And we were rivals, like, think about that. At that moment, I'm working for NBC, he's working for NBC.
Yes.
We're at competing stations, and Jimmy's as competitive as they come, like, we all want to get that interview. We all want to get before anyone else. And, yet he would put that aside and say, "How can I help you?" So, and he was always there doing that. So God love you, Jim Donovan. And we are all pulling for you in your fight. And I'm sorry to get, it gets me a little emotional. It's been 30 years since my uncle passed, and I see all the comments from everybody on Twitter that are always tweeting, calls from games over the years that live, in the annals of YouTube or wherever on the internet. And people tweet at me with those all the time. And that means so much to me. It means so much to my family to know that all these years later, people still remember. So that's powerful. And to Andrew Siciliano, who's, if somebody was going to get the job that is not Jim Donovan, so many people have done such a good job filling in, right? Like, I hope, and I know Browns fans know, like Cleveland sports is really lucky to have this run of, like, just great, gifted play-by-play guys and color commentators doing games, not just Browns games. I mean, and I know, Cleveland fans know it, because we all talk about it all the time. It's really a great special group. And so, Andrew's going to join that and fit in perfectly. Yeah. And I hope he has a long, sustained career calling Browns games the way Jimmy did.
So, John, that was really cool. Thank you for.
Sorry to get, like, my family will tell you, I'm a crier, man.
So
I'm a Browns fan. Like, I've been reduced to tears on Sundays on far too many occasions. So that's just, it kind of comes out. And I tell Jets fans around here all the time, I feel this kindred spirit with them from all the losing over the years. But, at the end of the day, I just want to see all the teams win. I want to see people do well.
I'll tell you what, a lot of Browns fans shed tears when we read about Jimmy's fight. And obviously we're nervous about what that means, and we want Jimmy to fight through. And we know, we
Yeah.
understand. A lot of people that never met Jim Donovan spent plenty of tears over that news.
Sure.
You obviously knew him, so you do not have to apologize for that.
No,
I want to say I appreciate you throwing out the guy that got me into it was Casey Coleman.
Yeah.
At Heinen's one day when I was in high school, I told him I wanted to be in broadcasting, and he said, "Well, you work for me at WTAM now." And he was like, "Show up on Monday at 2:00 in the morning," because they did the morning show.
Sure. Yeah.
And for like 3 straight years, he just lugged me to like all the Indians pregame shows. It was just me and Casey going around. So
fantastic. Oh man. I
appreciate you bringing that up.
Casey was great. Casey was so great, and it was a fun time growing up when you could watch Casey on 8, you could watch Jimmy on, on Channel 3, and, my uncle and the Gibb Shanley, of course, before him.
Yes.
On Channel 5, and then Bob Stevens and Matt Underwood. I mean, it was just, we've had a lot of really, really great sportscasters in Cleveland, and it's been a great run for a lot of people, and I hope we hear Jimmy back in the booth at some point.
John Chandler,
I know we will.
Yes, they got a heck of a sports anchor over there in New York as well. John, last order of business. I'm gonna let you go hang out with the family for the night. Give us your prediction this week. Browns, Giants at Huntington Bank Field. It takes me a minute to figure that out. Huntington Bank Field here in Cleveland.
How do you think this game's going to go? That one, I was like, what stadium is that? Yeah. I still call it Jacobs Field. So
that's fair.
Yeah. God, I'm not good at predictions. I will. I'll tell you, because I think the Giants are going to get back on track here. I think the Giants are going to win this by a field goal.
Ooh.
Whoever is doing the kicking, they're going to atone for it. I believe in Brian Dable as a coach. I think must win is a situation that a team with some talent on it is going to face and come up big. So I think it's going to be close. I think Giants by a field goal is what I'm going to say, which, as I tell everybody when I make predictions on our set, means you should take the Browns by 2 touchdowns. That's how that goes. I am terrible at predictions. I don't bet. I'm terrible at predictions, and the one prediction that stands out in my life, we were doing an Ohio State Michigan pregame show in the 2006 season. Was it 2006 when they were 1-2 and Troy Smith?
Sure was.
Ted Ginn and that fantastic team, right? And so we're on live television going into kickoff. We're minutes from kickoff. Ohio State, Michigan, and it's prediction time. And of course, everybody's predicting Ohio State. And I thought, well, we can't just have all Ohio State predictions here. So I looked around the room and I said, okay, well, somebody's got to go blue on this show. So I guess I'm going blue, guys. Michigan by a field goal. The walk to my desk from the studio at 30th and Euclid there was probably a 30-second walk. Like, the studio was like right behind me, right?
Yep.
And in that walk, my voicemail box had filled up. And I just sit there and I'd hit play and I'd put them on speakerphone and I would listen to Ohio State fans absolutely destroy me.
I'm sure it didn't end after that game.
And Buckeyes won, but it was close. Michigan could have pulled that out, and I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad that Ohio State, but I kind of felt in my heart that Michigan was going to give it more of a game than people were giving them credit for. So that was the last time I actually made a legitimate prediction on television. And
well, you know what to do then. You know what to do, Browns fans. I don't give gambling advice.
Right.
No gambling advice. Gamble responsibly and all that. But you heard you heard what he said. You heard his prediction, and then you heard his history. So do that what you will.
Take it for what it's worth. Giants by 3.
I think the Giants are going to win 5-3. And that's because I said last week, and I will stand by it until Deshaun Watson shows that he can do something consistently. I'm not picking him anymore because I picked him all the time last year, and I picked him again to start the year. So I think the Browns are going to win, but I'm still picking the Giants 5-3.
Fair.
John Chandler, go follow John, a Cleveland guy. Great stories. This was so much fun. You see his Twitter handle up there at John Chandler NBC. Appreciate your insight. Thank you for telling us about the New York Giants, kind of what you guys are feeling coming into the game. And we look forward to your coverage. And again, you got some big fans back here in Cleveland.
Appreciate you.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Cleveland's always it's home, man. It's got a special place in my heart, even when my worlds collide on Sundays in the NFL season.
Yeah, and it's colliding this week.
It's colliding.
We'll see how it comes out. John Chandler, get back to the family. Have fun. Good luck covering all the teams up there. You got your hands full up there in New York. Good luck covering all the teams.
It's going to be a busy fall. It's going to be, hey, we may just see the Guardians in the playoffs. So
we may have to talk again if that happens. I will reach out. John, thank you
very much.
Appreciate
you guys. Enjoy the game.
That was John Chandler from NBC New York. What a guy. What a guy. I knew it was going to be great. Again, as a Clevelander, you know he's going to be a great guy like that. But really nice of him to respond to me just reaching out on social media and asking if he'll come on, and great insight. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and hopefully you got a little information about the New York Giants as the Cleveland Browns head in to this Week 3 matchup. Again, the 1-1 Browns, the 0-2 Giants, 1 o'clock at Huntington Bank Field here in Cleveland on Sunday. All right, I'm out of here for the next 50 minutes or so. I'm going to go hang out for a minute. You guys go hang out for a minute. We've got a great show coming up on Garage Beer, so come hang out with me again at 9 o'clock as we're going to cover a lot of topics. We're going to get back into the Browns. We'll do it as only the Garage Beers can, but we're going to talk about the Blue Jackets for a bit and how they proceed into this season after what was just an unbelievably tragic offseason for them. We've got our buddy Dave Metzold coming on, so join us for that. And then after that, we'll get into the Guardians as well, because we're at the almost the end of magic number season, and the Guardians are playing pretty well. So we'll talk about that as well. So all that's happening on Garage Beers at 9 o'clock. Come back and join me then. Until then, make sure you follow the OBR on all the socials and at theobr.com. Make sure you subscribe. I appreciate you joining me. Thanks to John Chandler for jumping in. And until next week on the Dawg House, cheers and go Browns, everybody.